Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel, and this is the next video wherein we are going to take a look on a new concept in Java which is called as encapsulation. So encapsulation is quite an interesting topic, I would say. So basically we use encapsulation when we want to bind the data within the method. So this particular concept is used to enhance the security of your code. So let's suppose I'm going to be giving an example. You're working on a big project and you have 10 people working on a single code, but you want to restrict the access to those some particular variables within the class within the limits, right? So that no one randomly can come and access those variables and update them. So in order to enhance that kind of a security, use the concept of encapsulation. So I'll be also explaining you with some examples, like we will see in the code that how we can perform that, what exactly is the requirement and why do we use it and how we use it. So without further ado, let's get into the logic building. So I will be creating a class for that. So my class is going to be called as employee. And this is my employee class having certain variables around it. So this is called as my data, right? This is the data for my employee, right? And my employee will be having some kind of an employee ID, having the integer data type, and the second one is going to be the string, right? The string is going to be the name as well as the department in which the employee is working, right? So these are the two variables which I will be having over here in this side of this employee class. So what I'm going to be doing is that I'm going to be coming back to my main function, which is void main function inside of the class encap demo. So over here, I need to access these variables, which is employee ID, name, and department. So for that thing, I need to create the object for the employee class. So I'll be using the syntax for that, and I'm going to be creating the object for the employee, right? So I've created the object for the employee class, right? This is my employee class, and this is the object. It's giving me some kind of an error, so maybe I've had made some mistake. Employee. Okay, so I haven't put the parentheses. Okay, so now the object has been created. So in order to access these variables, employee ID, name, and department, what I need to do, I need to use the object, which is emp.empid. This is the variable which I've created. So for that, I need to just pass on the variable. So I will be just passing a random number. So this is my employee ID, and in order to update the name, I need to do the same thing. I will be using the object, and I will be passing on name for that. So the name which I want to pass is John. Let's suppose I'm just passing the John, and next thing I want to do is that I want to update the department in which the John is working. So for that thing, I will be using the object once again, and I want to pass on the department in which he's working. Let's suppose he's working in the HR department. So these are three things. As of now, we are not doing any major thing. We are just creating the variables of the employee class. Using the object of the employee class, I'm just updating the variables which I have created, right? So this is a simple thing. This is a simple task which we are doing. So now the variables has been updated. So let's try to run the code and update and print this particular values which we have created, right? So for that thing, we are going to be using the simple command system.println, and basis on that, I'll be just passing on the, okay, so for that thing, we're going to be using 3 times because of the 3 variables which we have created. So for that thing, let's copy paste, and this is a thing which I want to print first. So let's just pass on the values here. The next thing is the name. So the name has to be copied. Okay, so this gonna be just a random thing which we are doing. So okay, next is the department that I want to print over here. So the department needs to be mentioned over your system.out.println. So it's going to be just printing out this thing, right? So let's try to run the code. I guess I'm missing out something. So why exactly I'm getting the error? Employee.department, empid, and what's okay. So I haven't. So this is something which needs to be done in order to get. So let's try to run the code and we'll see the output. So the output that I'm going to be getting over here is basically the values that we have passed on to these variables. So as you can see that this is just a simple thing which we have done. We have created the variables, created the object, passing on the values, and just printing on the values. So let's suppose as of now, you can see the access of these variables is also available inside of the main function. So let's suppose I just want to provide some extra security to this code, and I want to make these I want to make these variables as private, right? And we are using the access modifier as private just to limit the access. So as you can see that as soon as I made these variables as private, I got the error over here and don't have the access. And you can see that if I will just show you the error which I'm getting, the field employee.employee ID is not visible. So that means the access of employee ID is not visible inside of the main function, and that is a cool part. That is a good thing, because we don't want anyone to access these variables without having just proper knowledge that yes, he's the actual user of the code and he can access these variables. So we want some restrictions, we want some security for that. So we can use the concept of encapsulation, right? We can use the concept of encapsulation, and basis on that we can try to modify, we can try to print out the values. So let me show you how we can achieve that. We're going to be using the actual concept of encapsulation now. So for that thing, I'm just going to be creating the random functions first, and then I will tell you what exactly is the function which you need to create. So I will be creating a function, a method over here, which is update ID. And for that thing, I want to update the ID. So that means I need to have certain thing which needs to be collected over here. So I will be having integer, let's say ID, right? This is the ID which I want to update, and I want this ID to be passed to employee ID. So this is basically gonna just update my employee ID over here, and I need to put the semicolon. So this particular function is done. Next thing is that I want to do is that I want to receive back. So as of now, I've just passed on the variable, so I need to receive this back. I want to just access that. So for that thing, I need to create a return type as integer, and what I want to do, I want to receive back. So I can call this function as show ID, and this is the method. And what I want to do, I want to return the ID, right? So let's just simply do this thing, empid. That's what I want to do. So it's going to be returning back the employee ID, which is their storage, which is just simply there inside of the employee ID. So these are the two methods which we have done, which we have created over here. And you can see that these methods are defined inside of the employee class. So that means we are doing the same thing. We are just trying to access the variables which we have created, employee ID, name and department, within the class, and that's the reason we are not getting the errors. And by this way, as you can see that, okay, so let me firstly print the the things over here inside of the main class, inside of the main function, and then we will see. So as you can see that as of now, by using just the general method, I'm getting the error over here. And let's suppose we want to call the function which is called as update ID. Right, this is the update ID, which the method which we have created, and I want to use this with the object, and I want to pass on the value. I want to pass on the values over here. So when I will pass on the values, so let's suppose I'm just want to create 7816. This is the new ID which I want to update. So as you can see that by using the method, by using this particular update method, because this is having the access inside of this main method. So by using the update ID method, I was able to update the value. So this is what we called as the concept of encapsulation. So binding your data with methods, I'm using the variables, I'm using my data with methods. So that's the reason I'm able to do the same thing. So let's call this as show ID. I want to show the ID which I've updated. So how do we do that? So it's going to be returning back the show ID. And I think I need to just mention this over here, because I want to print this, right? We need to print that. So how do we do that? Okay, as you can see that the error has been removed, and now it's going to return back the variable. I just need to comment this everything over here. Okay, so everything has been commented out, and this time I'm just updating the ID variable, and over here I'm just trying to update and trying to print the value of ID which I have passed on. So you can see that my data is restricted, so it's updating the value as 7816. So this means Previously, when I was trying to update the values by just using the object and using the variables, it was just a simple and general method which anyone can do. But as of now, what I've done is that I've created and I've passed on these. I'm just trying to update the variables indirectly using the methods, right? So that's what we call as the encapsulation. By using this particular concept, I was able to make my variables as private. I just restricted the access of those variables, and I also created some methods over here so as to access those variables within the class. So basically, as of now, as you can see that I've just passed on some random names over here. We call these as getters and setters. So basically, as of now, we are setting the value of ID here, right? So we call this as setters, and this show ID, we are trying to get the value. We are trying to fetch the values, right, of value of ID over here. So we call this as getters. So getters and setters. So talking about the encapsulation method, it's quite general, and it's quite an important concept. So Eclipse allows you to have some general functions which are already created. So you don't need to manually type all the methods for your variables. You can just simply right click over here. You can go to the resources. Let me show you over here. So let me just, where is the resources? Okay, so these are the sources, and over here, generate getters and setters. As soon as I click over here, it's going to be asking me like for which variable you want to use, you want to create the getters and setters. So I'm just calling it as set for all, select for all. And as soon as I click on the generate, it's going to be creating the getters and setters for all the variables which I have, which is employee ID, name, and department. So what I can do is that I can now remove my methods which I've created, and you can see that I can use the getters and setters which are created by this. So as you can see that the getters and setters are created for all of these variables. This is the get employee ID, set employee ID, string get name, set name, get department, set department. So this means everything has been created, and now we are good to go. So we can update all the variables, all the variables over here, and we can try to fetch those variables as well. And you need to pay attention to one thing over here. So you can see that the methods which are created, get employee ID, set employee ID, are basically the public method. So that means it is having the access to other classes as well, because this is going to be public. So that means other classes can also have the access over here, right? So that's the reason we can use these methods inside of our main class as well. But talking about the variables which you have created, this is basically the private, right? So that means it is only having the access limited to the class itself. So let's try to build something. Let's try to build a code over here, and let's try to see what are the variables and what are the values which we can update. So this is basically set employee ID. So employee ID, I want to update this as set employee ID. Okay, so I need to update the name as well, and I'm updating the name as let's call it as Chris. Okay, set the name. Okay, I guess I'm okay. I need to, because this is the string, so I need to put some double quotes over here. And I also want to update the department, right? So this is what I want to do. Set the department as marketing. Okay, this is what I want to do over here. And these are the three things which has been updated. So I want to just print out all the things over here. So for that thing, I need to use the getters, because getters is going to give me the output. So let's just print out all the things one by one. So let me remove this comment over here. So what I'm going to be doing, emp.getID, get emp ID, and I want to get the name as well. Get what do we call this? This is name, right? So it's going to return the name which I have passed over here. And next thing is get department, right? So that's cool, right? So let's try to print this thing over here and let's see if the output is coming as the correct one. All right, so you can see that the values has been updated for all these three variables which we have created over inside of the employee class. So yes, the getters and setters is something which you can use easily, right? So as to pass on the values absolutely correctly, and you can also ensure the security is there inside of your code. So what's the basically the use, right? So previously we had seen that we were just directly passing on the values, but this time we are passing on those values with some methods, right? By creating setters and getters. So this ensures the security of your code. What's the other benefit that you can have? So the other benefit is simple, right? Let's suppose, like I mentioned, that if you are working with the big project and you have 10 number of people, so every time whenever the getter or setter has been called, you want to create a log file as well. So let's try to see what I mean by that. So what I'm going to be creating over here, I will be just copying this just to show you. So let's suppose this is the getter employee ID. So as soon as, let's suppose somebody is trying to fetch the value of the ID over here, right? So you want to create a log file for that. So you can see, and you can just pass on the message that employee ID is fetched, right? Or accessed. So this is basically every time the getter is going to be called, you want to print this kind of a method, this kind of a message over here, so that every time somebody is going to be accessing this employee ID is going to be able to print this kind of a method, so that you can have some kind of a indication that somebody is trying to access your data. So this time, let's suppose if you're trying to set the employee ID, so this time you want to print the message as employee ID is updated. So let's try to run the code and we will see what is going to happen. So you can see that if I will be just running this code, you can see that when we were trying to pass the employee ID, we were trying to update the ID, it's going to print the message as employee ID is updated. So the second time when we were trying to access the employee ID, we were trying to print the value of employee ID, it's going to print out the message as employee ID is fetched or accessed. So that means it's going to be able to create a log file. So by that way, you also ensure the security, as well as every time whenever somebody is going to be trying to access the variables, trying to access your data, your variables, you will be able to create a log file, and that's going to give you extra security and extra advantage for the project, right? So yeah, that's about the encapsulation. I hope I was able to explain you all the things. And if you have any kind of a doubt, you can just simply go for the comments. I mean, you can just mention that in the comment box. I will definitely try my level best to answer those questions. So yeah, that's it in this video. That's it. That's all about the encapsulation. Thanks for watching the video. Thank you for your time, guys. See you next time.